Our story begins at a urinal in the semi-private restroom of an office building in North Seattle. To enter this restroom, you need a key, available from any of the building's tenants. But I was unable to find this key in the office of Metanoia Ministries, where I'd come for my third in a series of daytime support groups for men recovering from sexual brokenness. The waiting room was empty. No receptionist, just me. There was plenty of stuff, a whole wall of books and tapes and pamphlets with titles like The Battle for Normality, Desires in Conflict, and Someone I Love is Gay. From the next room, I heard someone talking on the phone. I could have asked him about the key, but I'm shy about interruptions and bathroom matters, and anyway, just then the door opened, and a man walked in. "Hey," he said, "how you doing?" "Great," I said. "How are you, Scott?" Scott was a tall, husky, red-haired guy who'd made a great impression on me at my first Metanoia meeting by presenting himself as what was to me a previously unheard-of social type. Men who have never had sex with men, but still identify as gay. Scott had battled homosexual desire daily, even hourly, since adolescence. And he had won. 32 years old, still a virgin. Masturbation was his vice, perhaps daily, perhaps hourly, and that's why he was at Metanoia, to deliver himself from his homosexual urges by walking in intimate fellowship with the Lord. And as he knew where the key was and also needed to go, he was going to walk in intimate fellowship with me to the bathroom. Which brings us to the urinal. A 4-foot trough. I don't deal with many urinals, primarily because it's physically impossible for me to urinate in front of anybody else. I don't like to talk about this because certain people think of pee shyness as a joke, probably because it features the word pee. Urinating next to Scott would be a particular torment because even though I knew it would be very, 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 very difficult, I also knew that if I forfeited my chance to urinate next to a 32-year-old ex-gay Christian virgin, I would regret it for the rest of my life. As we stepped up together to the trough, Scott couldn't have known the significance of what was happening. This was more than two guys sharing a pee. This was a sexual, spiritual showdown. On one side, Scott, representing piety, self-denial, and the world where nature is subjugated to the will of God. On the other side, me, undercover, representing deception, exploitation, and the world Scott would rather die than inhabit, the gay lifestyle. But as we stood there, unbuckling, then unzipping, these distinctions receded until all that remained was one question. Would he look? Just one glance down, just the tiniest peek in my direction, and I would triumph in the backsliding of an ex-gay all-star. Of course, spot-checking at urinals is a common practice among even the straightest men, but in no way could Scott glimpse my privates in masculine camaraderie. It would be heresy, pure and simple. At my first Metanoia meeting, Scott had proudly announced that he'd recently resumed tithing, donating 10% of his income to his church. Within a week of his first tithe, Scott received word of a raise his employer had neglected to give him, providing Scott with a substantial chunk of back pay along with a generous new raise. "That's God," Scott had said, and invited us to admire his new Ford Explorer on the back parking lot. A reward God would surely repossess should Scott's eyes travel anywhere south of my Adam's apple. Unfortunately, my side of the trough stays conspicuously dry, but Scott doesn't seem to notice. Both of us keep our eyes glued to the wall while I do my best to approximate the stance of a proficient urinator. Strong footing, relaxed body, vague expression of satisfaction. By this time, Scott's done. I feel him jostling a bit, and his elbow brushes mine. After a second, he clears his throat. He's lingering. Keeping my eyes on the wall, I execute a couple standard cruising maneuvers. The leisurely lean back to better display the wares. The furtive waggle and tug. And then he's gone, washing his hands at the sink. For a second, I think maybe he's seen nothing, but of course he saw it all and is graciously extending me a dose of Christian kindness. Love the sinner, hate the sin. It's big of him, considering that I've just revealed myself to be exactly what they always say we are, a desperate, low-minded freak groping himself at a urinal. Scott crosses to the doorway, then turns and smiles warmly. "See you in there." And he's gone. It started with a letter sent to the office of a newspaper I'd written a story for, chronicling some adventures I had in the world of gay prostitution. To the editor, "I was appalled to read the feature article by David Schmader in your magazine. He has no fear of God, no shame. Why do you condone this evil lifestyle? It is a sign of the end times as described in Revelations, when man prefers man and women to women. Yours truly, Lila." I was thrilled. He has no fear of God, no shame. Having gone through life fundamentally ashamed and fearful of everything, I adored Lila for bestowing upon me this brazen new persona. Unfortunately, the rest of her letter was hopelessly skewed. Prostitution, morally suspect and forbidden by law, seems to pose no problem for Lila. It's the homos that bug her, and who will eventually bring about the destruction of the planet. Still, Lila's letter got me thinking. I live in Seattle in an area called Capitol Hill, a gay-friendly neighborhood in a gay-friendly town, and it's very easy for me to forget that to a great many people, my most basic and boring desires are enough to spark fits of rage. I've never been able to take this rage seriously, though, founded, as it usually is, on God's word. I've read the book of Leviticus, and aside from the ban on same-sex sex, the book consists mostly of helpful hints for the preparation of animal sacrifices and the proper handling of menstrual uncleanness. It's like Martha Stewart living BC. And of course, nearly all of this has been dismissed. Only the homo embargo remains God's holy writ. But not everyone who opposes homosexuality is a Bible thumper, or a Quran whacker, or a Torah banger. Beyond the religious world lies another camp of homo opposers, whose bias is founded not on mushy morality, but on supposedly hard science. To these folks, homosexuality isn't a sin, it's a symptom. And this homosexual symptom can be eradicated by laying the axe to the psychological roots of same-sex desire. Now, from the late 1950s, a variety of methods have been used to treat this homosexual affliction, from shock treatments and nauseating drugs to hormonal injection and castration. But in the early 1970s, the American Psychiatric Association noticed that a good number of those suffering from this affliction, particularly those who had managed to avoid being shocked, drugged, and castrated, were perfectly functional members of society. And in 1973, the APA dropped homosexuality from its list of mental disorders. Doctors who maintained that gays were sick continued their practices on the fringe, swapping the barbaric methods of the past for a subtle therapeutic approach, recasting homosexuality as a developmental disorder, in which a person denied a strong parental role model as a child, seeks to fulfill natural homo-emotional needs, such as what happens between a father and son, through unnatural homosexual sex, such as what happened between me and all those UPS men. This theory gained momentum and exposure when it was embraced by the conservative Christian movement, who began presenting these theories with an ingenious air of impartiality. If you are sold on homosexuality, read no further, the pamphlets tease. If you are happy with your homosexual identity, this is not for you. But if you are ready, the truth can set you free. If you are happy with your homosexual identity. My identity has been almost exclusively homosexual my entire life, from my first erotic dream at age 10 all the way through to this morning when this guy Jake woke me up by thwacking my forehead with his penis. But have I been happy? Sure, there have been good times, but any happiness I've known as a gay man exists only in opposition to the hell of growing up a gay kid. And growing up gay is hell. One day, you're a kid running around, doing stuff, occasionally imagining how nice it might be to kiss Darren from Bewitched. Until one day, maybe it's on the playground, maybe it's watching some comedian on HBO, but you realize there's a name for people like you. And everything changes. Suddenly, every move, every impulse is judged, filtered, and manipulated for maximum effect and minimum detection, which leads to this freakish disconnection between your heart and gut and brain, and it's exhausting. But thankfully, the hell of gay childhood is somewhat assuaged by the intoxicating thrill of coming out. After so many years of repression, when you finally come out, a kind of euphoria kicks in with zinging hormones and blazing thoughts, and everything's charged with meaning and consequence. This is my first visit to a gay bar. This is my first time voting in a primary election as a gay. This is my first gay burrito. And it's very much like puberty, only you have expendable income and a car. And this second puberty phase is very important because a lot of queers didn't really go through puberty the first time around. We went through the physical changes, but not the social ones. We were too busy overachieving. While all the straight kids were mashing at parties and proms and rolling around back seats, all the queers were putting together the yearbook and devoting themselves to drama club and attempting suicide. And all the stupid stuff straights went through in junior high, queers are stuck doing in their 20s, 30s, even 40s. And there is something deeply unseemly about a man old enough to have children of his own writing a guy's name all over his notebook. Waiting by the phone, obsessing, okay, I know he said he'd call me tomorrow, but it was after midnight when he said it, so maybe he means the day after, and I should tell my mother I can't take her to the hospital. It's sick, but enthralling. Every fact of life is reconfigured, and all the hatred that used to go only inward now shoots out at your oppressors, who are everywhere if you know how to look. And suddenly the world becomes very clear. What's gay is good. Which reminds me of something I can offer up as a gay highlight. This was several years ago, and I was hiking with my boyfriend at the time in the Olympics, the mountains, not the games. And this was at the end of my great gay puberty, and I just spent a year working through the sludge that rises in the wake of coming out. The hidden homophobia, the insidious biases and shame, the crap that never made it onto Ellen. And I had emerged, the picture of gay pride with freedom rings and Queer Nation stickers and a big pink chip on my shoulder towards anyone who might deny me my pride. And I was hiking proudly up this mountain behind my big gay boyfriend when suddenly I was struck by the realization that pride made no sense. Throughout my coming out, pride had been exalted as this state of grace. But suddenly I realized that pride was nothing more than a defense, a way to compensate, even overcompensate, for what I'd always been told and apparently still believed was an inherently flawed and inferior way of life. If being gay was my impediment, pride was the closest thing there would ever be to a cure. But that day on the mountain, the scales fell from my eyes, and I came to understand as deeply as I've ever understood anything, that there is no impediment, and I require no cure, and pride is as stupid as shame. This realization quickly set me at odds with the gay community, for whom homosexuality is anything but neutral. Following my gay epiphany, it seemed all I could see were the gay community's limitations, the defensive pride, the political naivete, the depressing cultural gullibility. I mean, I understand the hunger for artistic representation and the importance of support, but to give a rousing standing ovation to an entirely mediocre gay arts event seems no different than clapping extra loud for the retarded kid in a talent show. It was not long after this time that I started hearing about conversion therapy and the cure for homosexuality. I'd heard of it before, but always as a joke. Now it was being seen as a threat, with gay activists denouncing the practice as bigotry posing as science, and its practitioners as diabolical, transparent liars out to commit homosexual genocide. Again, the defensiveness made me suspicious. If the conversionist lies were so transparent, what were we so afraid of? Over the course of my life, I have subjected nearly every one of my predilections, beliefs, and behaviors to rigorous scrutiny, from how I respond to the existence of evil in the world to how I pronounce the word memoir. But never have I seriously questioned my homosexuality, which, even when I considered it my impediment, always felt as natural to me as my desires to eat food, breathe air, and fear clowns. But what is natural? To the conversionist, nature is nothing, an unreliable mash of social influences and self-serving rationalizations. As one conversion book puts it, even though you say homosexuality feels natural and right, you've become very discontented in the gay lifestyle. Doesn't this indicate it's time to move on? You'll never know what's out there waiting for you until you give yourself the chance to find out. And as I'd already charted the world of prostitution and desperately needed something new to write about, I took the conversionist challenge. I found him listed in the white pages. Dr. Kraft, MD. Dr. Kraft had been referred to me by another psychiatrist, a gay-friendly Capitol Hill practitioner who fielded my call with commendable restraint. Well, he said, there's no one in Seattle doing that kind of work, but I believe there's someone out of town. That kind of work was conversion therapy. Out of town was the affluent Seattle suburb known as Bellevue. My first call to Dr. Kraft was answered by his secretary, who told me the doctor was in session and promised a prompt call back. 5 minutes later, the phone rang, and a deep voice flowed through the line. "This is Dr. Kraft. May I speak to Mr. Adams?" I'd taken a pseudonym. Nick Adams. Swiped from the fictional alter ego of Ernest Hemingway. I figured if it was a good enough straight drag name for the desperately hetero Ernest, it was good enough for me. "This is Nick. How are you, Dr. Kraft?" "I am always fine." At Kraft's request, I explained my situation. I was a homosexual man increasingly at odds with the gay community who was interested in exploring the possibilities of a cure. "No cure," Kraft said. "I do not cure. I can help you understand and overcome, but I do not cure." Apparently, this was a nod to the APA. No curing, just overcoming. So, tell me, Dr. Kraft, is yours a secular practice? For my first venture into the conversion world, I wanted to steer clear of Christianity. This was all creepy enough without involving the blood of the lamb, and besides, I had deep reservations about any program that hoped to eradicate my desire for all men by compelling my worship of one. But Kraft explained that his practice was spiritual, not religious, and we arranged a meeting for the following week. Now, For the sake of drama, I'm tempted to convince you that I ventured into the conversion world not knowing what might happen to me, presenting these events as the battle for my gay soul, with susceptible me sucked into a world of propaganda and promises of a new life I never knew I wanted until I opened myself to the truth. But heading into Dr. Kraft's, I had no illusions about being made straight. The conversionists and their crowd were fascinating freaks, like cannibals or Canadians. And I was the anthropologist. By walking among them as one of their own, I would either confirm my original suspicions that conversion therapy is the work of evil bigots preying upon scared and self-hating queers willing to do anything to feel for just one moment that they belong anywhere, or I'd have my suspicions proved wrong and come away with a deeper understanding of my fellow man. And I suppose there's a teensy chance I'd find that everything the conversionists claim is true and come away straight as a rail with a fabulous new life of societal approval and tax breaks. On Monday morning, I made the short but deeply symbolic drive to Bellevue, that mecca of heterosexual privilege. In the doctor's waiting room, I was met by the doctor himself, and in my nervousness, I asked again after his well-being. "I am always fine," Kraft said, as he led me to his chamber and placed me in a leather wingback chair opposite his own. Kraft was an older man, stocky, with white hair, white beard, and a deep, soulful gaze, which he directed straight at me. "You say you no longer want to be homosexual. If this is true, I can help you. But this will not be easy. This will require your complete dedication. I can instruct you, but the true work is ultimately up to you." I nodded, and Kraft continued, explaining that although he was indeed a certified psychiatrist, he didn't concern himself with the psychological aspects of homosexuality. To nip the homosexual drive in the bud, Kraft said, we would need to delve past the psyche and burrow all the way down to the glands, for it was on the glandular level that our work would be done. Desires, Kraft explained, are merely byproducts of our glandular secretions. To control our desires, we need only to control these secretions. And to control these secretions, we need only yoga. You're gonna make me straight through yoga? Through yoga, Kraft explained, I would learn to modulate my secretions and stop same-sex desire in its tracks. I had difficulty believing that heterosexuality might be induced through an activity that required wearing a leotard. But Kraft seemed sure of himself, and I did my best to stay in character. Okay, so let's say that through yoga, I learned to modulate my secretions. What's gonna make me straight? Kraft looked perplexed. I mean, what's gonna make me want to fuck women? This was the question. To many conversionists and ex-gays, heterosexuality is simply the absence of homosexuality. If you don't have a dick in your mouth, the theory goes, you must be straight. I beg to differ. And there was no way I was going to give up something as gratifying as gay sex without a guarantee of something equally entertaining in return. But Kraft explained that the cultivation of heterosexual desire wasn't important. For now, what mattered was suppressing my homosexual urges. "Patience, Mr. Adams," he said. "One step at a time." Earlier in our session, Kraft had spoken of his 100% success rate with male patients. Lesbians had occasionally proved impervious to yoga. But the men had not failed. Evidence of this success lined the walls, framed photographs of smiling men embracing wives and children. Had these guys managed to make that magical second step where suppressed homo desire somehow blossoms into viable hetero lust? Or were they simply neutered faggots, making the best of it with undemanding wives, executing just enough heterosex to produce the necessary offspring, and sneaking off in shame to hustlers and shrubs. Kraft asked if I was ready to schedule my next appointment. I'll let you know. And then came the Exodus boom. In the summer of 1998, conversion therapy burst into the mainstream with a series of full-page ads placed in several major national newspapers. Funded by a coalition of 15 conservative Christian organizations, the Truth in Love ad campaign offered images and testimonies of former homosexuals healed by the love of Christ. Gays and liberals predictably erupted, and talk of conversion was everywhere, from Nightline to the cover of Newsweek, which featured an unforgettable photograph of John and Ann Polk, a married pair of ex-gays at the forefront of the new conversion boom. Husband John, formerly a drag queen named Candy. John is the former national board chairman of Exodus International, the Christian referral service that claims to have touched over 200,000 lives with the truth about the way out of homosexuality. Wife Ann, formerly a big dyke named Ann. Ann is Exodus's premier cover girl, appearing in perhaps the most memorable of the newspaper ads, telling how she walked away from the gay lifestyle after Exodus helped her to fill the God-shaped hole in her heart. Now, my first response was, the way I figured it, any queers gullible enough to fall for this shit deserved what they got. But then a very smart friend of mine pointed out that gullible queers weren't the problem. Gullible straight people were. Because the basic message of these ads was that thanks to the miracle of conversion therapy, gays no longer have to exist, which is a short jump from saying gays shouldn't exist. And if people believe we shouldn't exist, my friend argued, then what's to stop anyone from denying our existence, either in the voting booth or by beating us to death with tire irons? I wasn't ready to take it that far, but obviously the time had come for me to reckon with the dark side. Now, unlike a lot of people grossed out by Christ, my negative feelings don't stem from childhood. My parents were a pair of Pennsylvania Catholics who later fled the religion all the way to Texas, where they raised me basically religion-free. For moral instruction, I was given a bookmark imprinted with the golden rule and told not to cuss in front of my grandparents. And it worked. I made it through high school without any major crimes against humanity, and in college, I found myself quite naturally drawn to contemplation of the religious world, thanks primarily to LSD. But this was enough to get me started on the standard liberal arts tour of theology: Buddhism, Taoism, Judaism, and eventually Jesus, on whom I developed an enormous crush. Underneath the centuries of crap that have been dumped on him are some of the most beautiful words ever spoken. And the more I read about Jesus, his own true words, and what other smart people said about him, the more I came to loathe Christianity for so grossly missing the point. This isn't the place to debate the Jesus of history versus the Jesus of Christianity, but let me just say that rejecting the simple, historical, genius of empathy Jesus of Nazareth in favor of the flamboyant, schizophrenic superhero, I am the Son of God, Jesus of Christianity, is one of the stupidest things humanity has yet done. And for the most part, those who call themselves Christians are to blame. Obviously, I had some objections to overcome if I was to walk undetected among the Exodus crowd. But as I flipped through the phone book for the Seattle chapter of Exodus International, I remembered a technique I'd read about in a psychology magazine, used by people with Tourette syndrome to train their minds away from words or images that trigger attacks, through the use of mental substitution. For example, if a man has a negative response every time he hears the word bobsled, he can train his mind to replace the word with another word. So instead of hearing bobsled, he hears baloney. I figured I could use this technique with the Christians. My main problem with conservative Christians isn't their bigotry toward gays, it's their befouling of Jesus' name in support of this bigotry. But if instead of hearing Jesus, I heard the name of someone I didn't care about, everything would be fine. So, whenever anyone said the name Jesus, I would hear the name Cher. I found the number for Exodus in the white pages, and my call was answered almost instantly. Exodus, can I help you? Yes, I was hoping you might be able to send me some information. What kind of information? Well, I've had homosexual feelings my entire life, and I guess I'm just exploring the options. This is a hair salon. I looked down at the phone book. There it was, listed right above Exodus International, Exodus Family Hair Care. No way was this an accident. Seeking a way out of homosexuality, I'd reached a hair salon. What was a hair salon doing calling itself Exodus? Let my people go in style. Carefully, I dialed the proper Exodus number and was promptly given all the information I needed. As I mentioned before, Exodus is merely a referral service, and after hearing my story, they referred me to Metanoia Ministries, a Christian counseling organization that hosted weekly support groups for sexual strugglers. I'd read about these meetings. Rooms full of deeply conflicted men swapping tales of homosexual relapse and spiritual rebirth, the air packed with forbidden sexual tension. Newsweek had photos, and from what I could see underneath the facial shadowings, the guys looked pretty okay, and I couldn't help fantasizing about infiltrating the meetings as a sort of gay Harriet Tubman. Rescuing the cuter conversion boys by inviting them over for an ostensibly chaste and godly potluck, where I'd spike the food with ecstasy, pop in the video power tool, and watch the liberation begin. For the heterosexuals and lesbians in the audience, power tool is a poignant social drama in which a young man, movingly portrayed by Jeff Stryker, is mistakenly thrown into prison, where everyone sucks on his giant penis. But my first metanoia meeting soon put these fantasies to rest. Instead of a room packed with sexual tension, I found a chilly office filled with folding chairs, books, and a large framed portrait of Cher. And instead of hordes of men, I found three. Bo, a slight nervous guy in his mid-30s, Scott, the virgin at the urinal you met in the first scene, and Grant, a youngish guy with bleached hair and a nose ring who served as the group's facilitator. After introductions and welcomes, Grant led us in prayer. Then the floor was open for discussion. After awkward glances all around, Bo took the lead. Well, he said, it's been a rough week. Scott and Grant leaned in with warm, encouraging smiles while I braced myself for my first salacious ex-gay confession. Instead, we received a laundry list of Bo's weekly woes. Well, on Tuesday, a pipe in my basement broke, and then on Friday, I had to take my dog Charlie to the vet, and that night my mom called. None of this fazed Grant or Scott, who nodded with loving concern while I thought, I'm missing Judge Judy for this? Things picked up a bit with Scott, who shared his tale on the miracle of tithing. And then the floor came to me as Grant announced, this is Nick's first time at Metanoia, and invited me to tell the group what had brought me there today. I told them nothing but the truth. Well, I've had homosexual feelings my entire life, and for the most part, I've had a really good time acting on them. But then I heard about your group, and I'm not sure what I'm looking for, but I'm here. This deceptive bit of honesty was enough to kick the meeting into relatively high gear, with Scott confessing his own battles with homosexual desire and Beau reporting on the root causes of his descent into the shameful gay lifestyle, causes ranging from the classic distant father smothering mother to the women's liberation movement, which made women look so ugly, Beau said, he had no choice but to sleep with men. Lots of men. In sex clubs and rest stops and honey buckets. To hear ex-gays talk of the gay lifestyle is to take a guided tour of hell, where desperate desire rules supreme and humans are nothing but hunks of meat to be devoured and discarded in the endless quest to fill the bottomless hole in the soul of every homosexual. A pretty perceptive observation on one level. No one taking a sober walk through a gay bar at 10 minutes to close is going to find much different. But to hear ex-gays tell it, you'd think that gay bars and the baths were all there could be to gay life, that there is no middle ground between John Candy Palk slurping at a glory hole and John Candy Palk kneeling with his ex-dyke bride at the altar. But what about those gays who reject the gay lifestyle without becoming eunuch zombies for God and instead just move to the suburbs? This was the question I found myself asking my metanoia group, carefully hidden in devil's advocate rhetoric. Well, what about those gays who aren't promiscuous? Some people would say that gay unions based on love and respect were never spoken of in the Bible. Grant was equally diplomatic. Well, some people would say that Sodom and Gomorrah reveals the Bible's position on the matter. Yes, but other people might say that Sodom and Gomorrah was punishment for inhospitality and same-sex rape, not same-sex love. Yes, but other people might point out that other books of the Bible, such as Romans and Corinthians, are equally emphatic on the matter. Yes, but other people might point out that still other books of the Bible, such as the entire New Testament, have nothing to say on the matter whatsoever. Yes, but we continued this passive-aggressive debate until I asked Grant about the particulars of his own escape from homosexuality, and was informed that Grant was, and always had been, 100% straight. A fact that surprised me probably more than it should have. More than a dozen Exodus ministries have closed after their directors returned to homosexuality, the splashiest example being Exodus's two founders, two passionately ex-gay men who fell passionately in love with each other. The gay community views this story as proof of the futility of conversion therapy, while the conversionists view the subsequent age-related death of one of the pair as proof of the inherent sickness of the gay lifestyle. And with Grant, I imagine metanoia was just aiming to avoid further embarrassment by hiring a foolproof straight guy right off the bat. As the meeting came to a close, Grant led us again in prayer, then delivered a closing speech that brought tears to his eyes and put my mental substitution theory to the test. This isn't about saying that being gay is bad. Committing homosexual acts is no worse than committing heterosexual adultery. What matters is finding a way to express our sexuality in a way that honors share. It doesn't matter if you're straight or gay. All of us have sacrifices to make to live in accordance with Cher's teachings. Sometimes these sacrifices will be very difficult, but all sacrifice will be made good when we pass from this life into eternity in the loving light of Cher. I was sent home with a collection of books from the Metanoia library. These books took me through the looking glass into the heart of the conversion world. I read about the year 1973, when the American Psychiatric Association was seized by gay radicals who forced the group to overturn their diagnosis of homosexuality. I read about the invention of homophobia, an imaginary disease hurled at anyone who opposed the gay revolution. And I read about doctors persecuted for the simple belief that no one need labor under an unwanted sexual affliction. At my second metanoia meeting, we continued discussion of this unwanted affliction, with Scott opening up about the root causes of his homosexual desire. Like Beau and many others of the conversionist mindset, Scott attributed his homosexuality directly to his father. Scott's father was, Scott said, an emotionally and physically distant man whose absence left Scott without a masculine role model to affirm his gender identity. Instead, Scott had his mother, an emotionally needy woman who forever skewed Scott's perception of womanhood. "I saw all women as manipulative and domineering," Scott said, adding that his apprehension only worsened after his brother exposed him to heterosexual pornography. Terrified of both smothering mothers and hot porno sluts, Scott naturally eroticized his longing for his lost father, and a homosexual identity was born. And this all sounded plausible enough, but once again, I found myself playing devil's advocate. "So, what happened to your brother?" Scott said his brother was a salesman currently living in Florida. "Is he gay?" Scott said no, and Grant jumped in, saying the ways that family and environmental factors influence a person are highly individual. And I said, yeah, but they grew up with the same mom, the same dad, and the same porn. How come Scott ends up gay while his brother ends up a salesman in Florida? Grant retreated all the way to heaven. "We cannot know why the Lord sends us temptation." Who said anything about the Lord? Scott said it's his dad that makes him hot for guys. Finally, Scott jumped in, saying it doesn't matter where the feelings come from. What matters is how I choose to deal with them, and for that, I will consult only one person. At home, I continued my metanoia studies. While my first batch of readings had been surprisingly lucid, the second batch was a much uglier affair. One book described homosexuality as the diseased union of two sexual infants joined in shared sexual self-pity. Hot. Another listed the pursuits that filled the days of even the most benign-looking homosexuals, including fisting, gerbling, and child molesting. A third pegged gays as the driving force behind the Nazi Party during World War II. After a week with these books, I returned to metanoia ready to fight, but was promptly humbled by my stupid humiliation before Scott at the urinal. In the meeting, things got only worse, with Grant continuing his smiley-faced gay bashing and Scott issuing me secret forgiving glances and me struggling just to keep my mouth shut. But when Beau launched into yet another diatribe on the shameful gay lifestyle, I knew if I didn't get out of there, I'd say something to blow my cover for good. During a break in the conversation, I excused myself and fled. This wasn't working. I couldn't go on presenting myself as both rational queer and would-be former homosexual. I wasn't the first person to think of infiltrating the conversion movement. After the Exodus boom, every gay magazine on the rack had its Exodus expose, not one of them going any deeper than this. And exposing the conversionists as merely deluded freaks is nothing, and no different than the conversionists exposing gays as merely promiscuous sociopaths. If I was to see anything beyond the most superficial stuff, I would have to get off the fence. No more devil's advocating, no more stupid urinal tricks, no more share. I would have to take the plunge, or, at least look like I was taking the plunge, which meant acting. And there's a reason why I only do shows where I stand around and talk. I hate acting. And to feign a spiritual rebirth for my metanoia group meant I'd either have to drudge up my college acting skills or get very, very stoned. I chose the latter. Pot has the wonderful effect of expanding my emotions and imagination while contracting that part of my brain that always needs to argue and be right, and basically makes me a very, very good liar. So before my fourth metanoia meeting, I got very, very stoned. And as I wandered into the building and wafted up the stairs, I was seized by the last and strongest effect pot has on me, the desire to eat everything. Suddenly, all I wanted was a Snickers and some enchiladas and a shake, but then there was Grant behind me on the stairs saying, "Hey, wasn't sure we'd see you again," and leading me into the room with Bo and Scott. They smiled, I sat, we prayed. Then the floor was open for discussion. Bo spoke first, leading us again through the grievances of his week. For a second, I thought being stoned might make this more interesting. But all I could think about was how badly I wanted some Pringles. Then Scott spoke, and finally the floor came to me as Grant announced with a great warm smile, "Welcome back, Nick." Yeah. I guess first thing I want to tell you is my name's not Nick. It's Dave. And I don't work at Office Depot. I work at a gay-friendly newspaper on Capitol Hill. And I frequently have sex with other men. I lied because when I first started coming here, I had no idea how much I wanted to open up to you guys. I mean, I heard your stories about the desperate gay lifestyle and how your homosexuality resulted from abandonment by your father, and I was threatened. I mean, you guys saw me coming in here and arguing and intellectualizing everything. Oh, all my life, my intellect has gotten in the way of my happiness, but now I know it is time to give myself to something bigger than intellect. And that something is Jesus Christ. Does anybody have any chips? My performance was met with unanimous acclaim and led to a private consultation with Grant, who helped me map out the steps to my new life. First, deeper involvement with my metanoia group, including thrice-weekly meetings and sessions with an on-site therapist. Second, reconnection with my father for remedial gender role modeling. And third, a clean break with the gay lifestyle, including but not limited to quitting my job, moving out of my apartment, and abandoning my homosexual sex life. "You are heterosexual in Christ," Grant said, my hands in his. "No matter how deep your homosexual feelings are, deeper still lies your heterosexuality, buried under 1,000 fears." To break with the gay lifestyle, to reconnect with my father, to immerse myself in good Christian heterosexuality meant one thing. The next day, I booked a flight to Texas. And in 2 weeks, I was on a plane pointed at the biggest, burliest state in the contiguous US. In one fell swoop, I was ridding myself of my job, my apartment, and my homosexual sex life for 10 days. My parents were thrilled to have me visiting on such short notice, and while my metanoia buddies were sad to see me go, Grant was happy to hook me up with the Dallas chapter of Exodus. Washington Christians are one thing. Texas Christians are something else. And to prepare, I embarked on a mini crash course in conservative Christianity, from daily Bible readings to viewings of the 700 Club. On the plane, I delved further into my metanoia studies. While all around me, people read John Grisham and People magazine, I pored over Homosexual No More, carefully hidden in a 3-ring binder. Here was another book pushing the theory that the primary cause of male homosexuality was deficiencies in the father-son relationship. But as I looked back on my relationship with my own father, I could find no glaring deficiencies. My dad was a kind and generous guy I'd always admired and respected. If we were never particularly close, it was simply due to a lack of shared interests. He liked mowing the lawn and watching Dallas Cowboys. I liked reading Tiger Beat and lip-syncing to the Supremes. If anything, my fagginess was the cause of any distance between us, not the result of it. And as for the gaping chasm that had existed between us ever since I was 11, when I saw that he knew what I was, well, we'd learned to bridge that with a nearly impenetrable layer of good cheer. We were like office buddies, the kind that might enjoy having lunch together in a group, but would never think of going on their own. We were cordial and polite, and this was enough. For a man of my dad's generation, mere tolerance of a fag son was an act of great generosity and restraint, and to expect anything more would have been foolish. The good thing was, he left me alone. The bad thing was, he left me alone. Still, even now, it is hard to imagine how we might have worked things differently. There's just no precedent or even a vocabulary for fathers and gay sons. Maybe in some alternate universe, my dad and I could have had a heart-to-heart about the facts of my gay life. Now, son, you're going on 13 now, and soon you'll be experiencing some changes. This is puberty, and your body will mature, and you'll begin to experience intense sexual desire. Now, judging from your aversion to team sports and that Go-Go's poster over your bed, I'm assuming there's a chance you might be homosexual. This is not a problem. Some people might think differently, but we can't waste time worrying about the asshole, so for now, let's stick to sex. Now, the main thing you gotta watch out for is the A's. Wear a condom every time you have anal intercourse, top or bottom. Or you might want to skip anal intercourse altogether for a while. Stick to other stuff, like oral sex, which has a much lower rate of HIV transmission. Still, there is some risk, and I'll trust you to use your best judgment. Now, if you do have anal intercourse, you'll want to use a lot of lubricant. Still, the stuff ain't cheap, so remember, in a pinch, you can always use saliva. But you don't want to be spitting all over like Yosemite Sam. You want to be cool. So there's this trick. You just kind of pass your hand over your mouth like you're having some deep, sexy thought. There you go. That is disgusting even to me. Listen, I understand that I am entirely complicit in this office buddy arrangement. After so many years of silence, I can't imagine relating to my father on an intimate, emotional level. And I don't like to say this, but I have come to the realization that there is an unspoken understanding between my father and me, that of my parents, he will die first, if only to spare us the agony of attending my mother's funeral, where we'd gape at each other across her grave and wonder how the hell we were ever going to console one another. Lucky for us, my mom seems to be keeping her part of this arrangement and shows no signs of dying anytime soon. My mother had been positively rejuvenated by my coming out and turned into gay supermom, volunteering at AIDS organizations, manning gay youth hotlines, getting way more involved in the gay community than I ever did. But my father kept his distance. He was tolerant and supportive, but both of us knew there were parts of my life that would not be discussed. This was the tacit agreement between us. I spared him the disgusting details of my love life. He spared me the disgusting details of his golf game. And of course, the conversionists would say that it was exactly this respectful distance between my father and me that caused my homosexuality. That my repressed longing for my father was directly responsible for my shameful attraction to Bruce Willis. Not to mention my reluctance to trust anyone ever, and the compulsive dividing of the men in my life into two camps, potential saviors and disposable trash. And maybe they were onto something. Maybe the key to my transformation lay in this uncharted terrain between my father and me. But when my father picked me up at the airport, I began to sense that a strange transformation had already begun to take place. "Sorry, your mom couldn't make it," he said as he drew me into a large public hug. "We had a late night out last night. Carl, you know Carl, your mom works with him at that AIDS food pantry. Everyone calls him Princess." Well, last night after the P-Flag meeting, Carl took us out to this drag show where your mom's friend Jerry was doing his thing. Nicest guy in the world, but all night he kept saying, "I'm gonna make you dance with me," and I kept saying, "I'm not your type, sweetie." Your mom thought that was pretty funny. It was like he was speaking in tongues. When did my dad start going to P-Flag and drag shows and calling men sweetie? Obviously, someone had been making strides to expand his horizons, but two could play at that game, and I retaliated by asking if we might be able to do something together, just the two of us. Go to a ball game or play around at golf or something. "Sure, we can look into that," my dad said, "but we got a pretty packed schedule as it is. Your mom's got us going to some play tonight, and this weekend we've all got tickets to a lecture by Chastity Bono." What have you done with my father? At home, I cornered my mother, who was as amazed by my father's transformation as I was. She gushed about how when she couldn't make it to P-Flag, he insisted on going on his own, and how the previous week he'd rented the bird cage. I did my best to share her enthusiasm, but I was a little creeped out by my father's rebirth as a village person. Yes, it was wonderful and heartening, but also kinda icky and vaguely threatening, because I'd always considered my father to be the one responsible for the distance between us. It was his shortcomings that separated us. Now he was making this effort to connect, and all I wanted to do was run as fast as possible in the opposite direction. Besides, I didn't know if metanoia would approve of my getting remedial gender role modeling from Uncle Mame. Thankfully, my call to Texas Exodus got things back on track. A very friendly secretary listed an array of resources in the area, from afternoon and evening support groups to extended workshop intensives to a 3-day retreat scheduled that very weekend at True Hope Ministries, 20 minutes south of Dallas in Arlington. I phoned True Hope immediately and was informed by another very friendly secretary that these retreats always filled up months in advance. However, she said there were sometimes cancellations and agreed to put my name on a waiting list. God must have been smiling on me, because 20 minutes later she called back and said, "Mr. Schmader, we found you a slot." The True Hope retreat consisted of 2.5 days of study, discussion, and hands-on workshops designed to break the patterns of homosexual thought and action for $475. A bit steep, but I figured I could write it off, and I was willing to pay double that to get out of listening to Chastity Bono. I was instructed to bring a Bible, basic toiletries, and loose-fitting clothes. To these things, I added, of course, a big wad of pot. On Friday morning, I packed up and headed for Arlington. To my mom, I told the truth, but I convinced her to let me lie to my father. He'd only just managed to catch up with the gays, and there was no need to confuse him with the ex-gays. I told him I was visiting old friends in Austin. The True Hope retreat was housed on the grounds of a small Methodist college. On the campus, I found handmade signs directing me to the True Hope Meeting Hall, a small room already bustling with people. At the registration table, I was given a name tag and told to stand by while they tracked down my bunkmate. We had bunkmates. What were they thinking? Bunking 2 struggling homosexuals together makes about as much sense as putting mini bars in the rooms of the Betty Ford Clinic. And more importantly, if I had a bunkmate, where was I supposed to get stoned? I turned to the woman at the desk. I'm sorry, I wasn't aware we'd have bunkmates. And to be honest, I'm not sure it's the best idea to bunk me with someone like myself. Oh no, she said, your bunkmate isn't like you. What, you mean he's straight? She nodded and smiled. You mean like really straight? She looked confused. Is he an ex-gay? Oh no, she said, he's a never gay. This, I soon found out, was a distinguishing feature of the True Hope Retreat. For every conflicted homosexual on the grounds, there was a corresponding heterosexual, a legitimate heterosexual, providing 24-hour support and hetero-mentoring. My hetero-mentor was Ted, a smiley guy from Houston who pumped my hand with great Christian vigor, saying, "Good to know you, Dave, good to know you." Ted then introduced me to his wife and 2 daughters who'd come to send Daddy off on his weekend mission to save the queers. Ted's wife could barely look me in the eye, while his daughters stared at me like I was an exotic zoo animal. Ted kissed his family goodbye, then escorted me to the dorms. Now I suppose you're wondering, what did Ted look like? Well, he was a babe, in that thick-necked, open-faced Brett Favre kind of way, with a polo shirt and khakis and one of those amazing butts only straight guys have. Perfect, but entirely unaware of its own perfection. Unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately, Ted's foxiness was undermined by every word from his mouth. And he talked a lot. Beautiful day, huh, buddy? Kind of day that makes you glad to be one of God's kids, you know what I mean? As we walked, Ted smiled and waved to other returning instructors. I imagined these guys shared a sort of spiritual bond for devoting themselves to this unsavory task, like 14th century missionaries who dared to dance with the lepers. Or maybe these guys were all just Christian closet cases, and very soon Ted would be leading me through some questionable bonding ritual where we recite the Lord's Prayer, then wrestle with our shirts off. Ted kept up the chatter. Man, I love being outdoors. I love it. When the Messiah comes, I know I'll be outside in the sun. The God talk continued until we got to the dorm room, where Ted pointed to the bunk beds and said, "Mind if I'm the bottom?" I had a choice. Either A, deliver the smartass retort every cell in my body was screaming for, or B, play dumb and pass. For the greater good, I chose B, but why did Ted want the lower bunk? Was he afraid of heights, or was he just required to make it as difficult as possible for me to sneak out at night and suck off the janitors? That evening, I was introduced to the rest of the True Hopers at a meet and greet function in the dining hall. The gays consisted of 7 men, not including myself. Some big husky guys like Metanoia Scott, some little nervous guys like Metanoia Bo, all of them tinged with varying degrees of Nelliness and twangy voices. Plus, there were 4 women, 3 of whom were traditional feminine types with sweaters and slacks and longish coiffed hair. The 4th, however, was a big old dyke. One of those stylishly butch young sports dykes that make lusty gay ladies turn their heads and say, "Damn!" And lusty gay boys turn their heads and say, "Damn." But Allison was obviously putting all this behind her. Her hair was a few months grown out Caesar cut, under her arm was a pocketbook, and on her feet were a pair of espadrilles. That night, Allison and I sat together at the True Hope welcoming ceremony, where our pastor led us in song and prayer before outlining the activities for the weekend. In addition to guest lectures on Friday and Saturday, there would be support groups, a Sunday morning church service, and plenty of time for private contemplation and prayer. On Sunday afternoon, there was to be something described only as fun time, and on Sunday evening, the entire retreat would wrap up with the True Hope Celebration Gathering, a sort of informal performance exhibition where each of us would be required to share something, a memorized Bible passage, a spiritual song, a painting or drawing commemorating our experience at the True Hope retreat. This is about spiritual creativity, our pastor said. True Hope isn't about shutting a part of yourselves down. It's about opening all of yourselves up to the great glory of God. And apparently we would be glorifying God by staging an ex-gay talent show. When the pastor's speech was over, the hetero mentors filed from the room, leaving us gays to our first True Hope lecture. Our speaker was a man named Phil, a real-life ex-gay here to speak to us about embracing our gender identity. One of the hardest steps on our path to wholeness is embracing that gender that we've always felt somehow separate from. That gender that has caused us so much pain and confusion. Who here hasn't felt the sting of those words, sissy, fairy, tomboy? In the gay lifestyle, we protect ourselves by turning our backs on our gender roles. Phil went on to describe how many women use the lesbian lifestyle as a protective shield to shut out men, who often represent pain and abuse, while gay men embraced the fantasy of homosexuality as an escape from male responsibility and mature relationships with women. Our gender is not an accident. God planned our gender before we were born. To become whole, we must answer the call of gender without fear. Men, read the sports page. When I spend time on the sports page, I feel more informed about what other men are talking about. And when I sense their approval and enjoyment of being around me, I feel affirmed as a man. I feel more masculine. Women, indulge your feminine side. Take pride in your appearance and feminine clothes and combining colors and accessories. And all of you, thank God every day for making you who you are. Stand before the mirror and say it out loud. God, thank you for making me a man. God, thank you for making me a woman. Back in my room that night, I was unable to stand before the mirror and thank God for making me a man. However, I did thank God for making Ted a man. In his sleepy time sweatpants and faded t-shirt, he looked just adorable. But, of course, he had to open his big yap. Hey, how'd it go tonight, buddy? I could tell Ted was hungry for active involvement in my conversion experience, but I wasn't up for playing enthusiastic convert all weekend, and in response to his question, I said only, fine. Anything you want to talk about? And I thought, yeah, let's talk about how watching ESPN is going to make me straight and watching PBS is going to make you gay. And while we're at it, maybe you can tell me why you're here, what you get out of this, and how much I'd have to pay you to ride my face like a mechanical bull. But instead, I just said, no. I hear you. Listen, buddy, I know that none of this is easy, but I want you to know that I'm here for you. Anything you want to talk about, anything you need, I'm here. On Saturday morning, an unnervingly chipper Ted awoke me in time for breakfast, after which the gays gathered for our support groups, which were divided into men's and women's, unfortunately. I was dying to hear the women's stories, but instead the gay men were gathered with ex-gay Phil, who offered to answer all our questions about his conversion success. When asked how long his conversion had taken, Phil said it took approximately 2 years to comprehend the root causes of his homosexual desire and to make a clean break with the gay lifestyle. Another 1.5 years passed before he was no longer attracted to men. And it was another 2 years before he grew into his true heterosexual identity. Then someone asked if Phil had a wife, and Phil said nope, he wasn't yet married, but he was greatly looking forward to it. This led someone to ask the big question, have you had sex with a woman? Phil said nope, he'd never had sexual relations with a woman. Like Scott from Metanoia, Phil said his perception of women had been damaged by early exposure to heterosexual pornography, which presented women as terrifying creatures who demanded degrading sex. I found this vilification of hetero porn fascinating. I grew up with the stuff myself, hardcore images of hot, slutty ladies getting busy with big, fat, ugly, hairy, straight men. And rather than turning me against hot, slutty ladies, it gave me a strange and enduring soft spot for big, fat, ugly, hairy, straight men. But now, Phil said, I see women for who they are. I see women and their sexuality is beautiful. Now I find intimacy with a woman quite arousing. Holding hands, walking arm in arm, hugging. These new feelings give me the assurance that I will not have difficulty responding sexually to my future wife. Following Phil's sizzling confession, the floor was open for discussion, and I was treated to a collection of stories virtually identical to the ones I'd heard at Seattle Metanoia. Distant fathers, smothering mothers, sex in honey buckets. Only they call them porta potties down there. The guys were all so typical. Too typical. It dawned on me that it was entirely possible I was sitting in a room full of gay undercover reporters. Certainly, this was just pot-induced paranoia. I'd managed to sneak out to my car for a couple puffs before the meeting, which meant that when the time came, I was like totally ready for lunch. In the lunchroom, I sat next to Allison, on whom I developed a little crush. Mostly because she kind of resembled my dyke friend Rachel from back home, only in a floral print Laura Ashley dress, which she wore about as comfortably as a German shepherd wears a sweater. Over lunch, Allison told me all about herself. Born and raised in Denver, middle kid between 2 brothers, raped her freshman year in college, then lived as a lesbian for 11 years before moving to Texas last May. Now, there were a good number of people here at True Hope who, like Allison, were obviously gayer than gay Gayerson. But nearly all of them gave off that stink of repression and effort, while Allison seemed normal, like someone I would know in regular life. But any fantasy I had that Allison shared my wry postmodern reason for being here was punctured by her next question. Have you been born again? So far, maintaining my guise at True Hope had basically meant lying or silence. But for Allison, I spoke, and I told the truth. No, I haven't. And she said, I never had a born-again moment either. For me, it's been like a slow, steady build, but every tiny step I take toward Jesus is met by a giant step by him toward me. And I thought, and when there was only one pair of footprints in the sand, but I held my tongue. That night, Allison and I sat together at the second True Hope lecture. This one was entitled Winning the War and was delivered by a handsome, middle-aged woman named Paula. Paula wasn't an ex-gay, just an ex-gay sympathizer, and she was very sympathetic. We cannot live in this world without temptation. But all temptation is not sin. A homosexual thought can either be indulged or killed. And your thought life is the battleground where the war on homosexuality will be won or lost. To win the war, Paula said, we would need to develop prevention strategies to arrest homosexual temptation before it crossed over into sinful practice. And Paula put forth a variety of methods, from reciting Bible passages during moments of weakness, to taking cold showers to avoid masturbation, to changing jobs or apartments to escape an attractive coworker or avoid a gay neighbor. But these are only temporary solutions. To truly save ourselves, we must confront the deep emotional and spiritual needs at the root of homosexual desire. Unfortunately, these needs are often ignored in the gay lifestyle. I braced myself for more idiotic talk of the gay lifestyle, but Paula carefully avoided the usual grotesque hyperbole. Much of same-sex lust is rooted in envy. What we lack in ourselves, we are attracted to in other people, but having sex with other members of our own gender will never increase our own masculinity or femininity. For most homosexuals, a majority of their sex takes place with strangers or casual acquaintances. Casual sex can provide physical pleasure and temporary fulfillment, but in the long run leaves a person feeling used and depressed. You wonder, does anyone love me for anything more than my body? At bottom, homosexual relations are as effective as drinking salty water. Both activities leave us unsatisfied, thirsting for more. I felt the blood rush to my neck, and I wish I could tell you it was merely indignation. But Paula had hit upon something I'd considered before myself, the inherent futility of gay sex. It's a simple biological fact that heterosexual sex leads to the propagation of the species, while homosexual sex, even the best homosexual sex, leads only to happy smiles and spoogy towels. God built sex with a higher purpose. Unfortunately, in the gay lifestyle, this higher purpose is often obliterated in selfish pursuits of pleasure and soul-numbing promiscuity. Again, her motives were specious, but her points were undeniable. There are times I walk through the gay neighborhood and feel rejuvenated and liberated by the blatant sexual vibe where anything might happen. Other times, it's compulsive and exhausting. Cruising becomes a reflex. It would be impossible to count how many times I've been out with a friend, the two of us deep in conversation on a most serious subject. Then a male form passes. Our heads snap around, we take our politely rapacious glances, and the conversation continues without a hitch. This happens to gay men 9 million times a day. But when does it stop, and what the hell are we looking for? Paula knew. Ultimately, our deepest needs are met only through our relationship with God. In rejecting God's plan, homosexuals spend their entire lives chasing alluring shadows. They wind up in darkness, alone and unfulfilled. After the meeting, I walked back to the dorms accompanied by Allison, who seemed to have been rejuvenated by the lecture, prattling on about how leaving her former life was the hardest but best thing she'd ever done, and how Jesus was the first man she'd ever trusted. And then with disarming candor, Allison said that she knew that she would never truly conquer her homosexuality. She would never lose her desire for women. But this, she said, was her cross to bear, the sacrifice she was required to make to enter the kingdom of heaven. And heaven, Allison said, would be so far beyond any happiness known on earth that this sacrifice would seem like nothing. Back in my room, Ted was already in bed, dozing with the light on, his Bible splayed open on his chest. Ted lay on top of the covers, one hand draped across his brow, the other tucked beneath the waistband of his shorts. It was like the opening shot of a porno film. And for a second, I just stood there looking until he opened his eyes and he smiled. "Hey," he said, moving the Bible from his chest to the dresser, then patting a space beside him on the bed. "Have a seat." I did as I was told. Ted asked how my night had gone, and I said fine. He asked if there was anything I wanted to talk about, and I said no. Then he reached over and he took my hand. "Listen, buddy, I know that this is a tough time for you, but I want you to know that what you're doing, it's the bravest thing in the world. What you're doing, it's like what Jesus did, turning your back on something a lot of people say is okay, but that you know is wrong. Listening only to that quiet voice of truth within you. That's bravery, buddy. And I love you for it." On Sunday morning, we gathered for the True Hope church service, where our pastor led us again in song and prayer before taking us on a whirlwind tour of the Bible's greatest hits on homosexuality. Ted sat by my side, his arm draped over the pew behind me. We could have been at the drive-in. Around us sat all the other soon-to-be ex-gays with their hetero mentors, all listening with rapt attention to key bits from Genesis, Judges, Corinthians, Romans, Timothy, and of course Leviticus. But the worst was yet to come. When the pastor's speech was over, we were introduced to our final True Hope lecturers, a family consisting of a mother, a father, and their clean-cut, well-dressed 30-year-old faggot son. The mother spoke first. When our son told us he was gay, we were devastated. We told Chris that we could never stop loving him, but that we would never accept his homosexuality. Each day I prayed, "God, take him out of this lifestyle and bring him back to you." And we never hesitated to warn him of the heartache he would face. We weren't being judgmental, we were just being parents. 10 years later, Chris left homosexuality and recommitted his life to Christ. But it was too late. Chris was HIV positive. At this, Chris joined his mother, addressing us with tears in his eyes as he spoke of his years in the lifestyle, the desperate promiscuity, his hunger for even the cheapest intimacies, and finally his viral wake-up call, leading him back to his family and his Lord. At this, Chris was embraced by both father and mother, and all three burst into tears. Apparently, this display was meant to infuse us with hope and confidence. But it only made me want to boil the entire family in lead. The mother's proud reporting of rejecting her son and never hesitating to warn him of the heartache he would face. What a surprise their stupid-ass son could envision nothing better for himself than sticking his butt in the air for all comers, and why bother with a condom if you're on a one-way track to hell? The parents could hardly be more culpable if they'd injected him with the virus themselves. Then the father spoke, informing us of the class action lawsuits his and other families of HIV-positive ex-gays were filing against the American Psychiatric Association, charging the group with misrepresenting homosexuality as a harmless lifestyle choice and holding them accountable for the infections and deaths of their children. When the father's speech was over, the family and the gays and the mentors all headed for the lunchroom, while I headed straight for my car. I'd been so good, saying no more than 200 words my entire time at True Hope, but I was reaching a threshold even pot couldn't contain. Fuck my romantic notions of viewing my enemies objectively, of appreciating humanity in all of its wonderful variety. For the first time in my conversion dealings, I felt I was in the presence of true evil. Not just the terrifying family, but everything from Ted's creepy professions of love to Paula's stealth bomb attacks, gently damning all homosexuals to lives of misery and loneliness. Two things that apparently never touch the lives of heterosexuals. Never mind that for every gay teen suicide, there's a straight teen cramming her baby down the toilet. That for every miserable, lovelorn homo, there are 6 miserable hetero divorces. No, for the conversionists, it's black and white. Homosexuality is hell, and heterosexuality bliss. How true. And how brilliantly the conversionists womp queers' weak spots, which are everybody's weak spots. Who hasn't been manipulated by conventional sexual morality? And who doesn't hunger for the privilege that comes with fitting in? And who has anything but a complex and imperfect relationship with their father? Ooh, that father thing, I'm sorry, but if the simple fact of an absent father causes homosexuality, why aren't our inner city environments, where single mothers are the norm, bursting with faggots? There wouldn't be drive-by shootings, there'd be drive-by rimmings. No, I don't mean to completely dismiss the father thing. There are obviously important strides to be made between gays and their dads, but really, the last person who should be giving me shit about my fucked up fetishization of a father figure is a Christian. All I wanted to do was get in my car and flee, but I was so close to the end, and I didn't want to miss the ex-gay talent show. As I mentioned before, 2 hits a pot makes me calm and functional. 3 hits puts me in the perfect state of mind to watch Teletubbies and Fellini films. 4 hits makes the entire world look like Teletubbies in a Fellini film. I took 5. And when I wandered back to the campus, the dining hall was empty. So was the rec room and the dorms, and then I remembered. It was fun day. And as I wandered out to the mini playfield, I saw the male gays and their hetero mentors engaged in a rambunctious game of touch football. Apparently, this was the hands-on gender mentoring we'd been promised. And when Ted saw me coming, he hollered for me to join them. Claiming I had asthma, I kept to the sidelines. It was just like junior high, only back then, half the guys on the team didn't squeal and flinch when the ball came their way. Watching ex-gays play football is like watching a dachshund swim. They can do it, but just. At dinner, we were reunited with the women, for whom Fun Day had apparently meant one thing: makeovers. The gay women entered the dining hall looking ready for the runway, except for Allison, who looked like she'd been hit by a tagger. That night was the True Hope celebration gathering, and after dinner, the entire retreat group filed into the rec room. Almost too many people for the space, but creating a nice, warm environment for our time of sharing. Earlier in the day, wandering around stoned and furious, I'd made plans to use my time of sharing to deliver a searing address, unmasking myself as a faggot and damning the conversionists for their shameless perversion of both God and nature. Then I realized they could say the exact same thing about me, and I considered just doing an interpretive dance of the 10 Commandments. But at that morning's church service, I'd entertained myself by memorizing my favorite passage from the book of Leviticus, a list of tips for identifying leprosy. And in my later stoned wanderings, I'd stumbled upon an old acoustic guitar in the rec room. After relearning the only 4 chords I'll ever know, I knew what I would do. The celebration gathering began with a pair of male hetero mentors reviving a skit from a previous retreat, a rewrite of Abbott and Costello's Who's on First, substituting biblical names and places. No, Noah's on Mount Ararat. Then who's on Mount Sinai? Exactly. Next was one of the female gays, exhibiting a collection of biblically inspired watercolors. Then came my time to share. Hi. I'd like to thank you all for having me here this weekend. I've learned a lot, and I'm really looking forward to the rest of my life now. Tonight, I'd like to present my favorite passage from the book of Leviticus, chapter 13, verses 40 through 42. If a man's hair has fallen from his head, he is bald, but he is clean. And if a man's hair has fallen from his forehead or his temples, he has baldness of the forehead, but he is clean. But if there is on that bald head or the bald forehead a reddish white disease spot, it is leprosy breaking out on his bald head or on his bald forehead. It is leprosy breaking out on his bald head or on his bald forehead. When I conceived this piece, I'd imagined it to be the most subversive bit of postmodern recontextualization since Andre Serrano's Piss Christ. But the true hopers responded with only polite smiles and light applause. And Ted leaned over to say, "Hey, buddy, I didn't know you played the guitar." Then the newly vandalized Allison stepped before the group. For a second, I thought I was at an amateur drag competition. But instead of a lip sync to Vicky Carr, Allison recited Psalm 23, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." Watching her, I was reminded, strangely enough, of porn. As a teenager battling my own queerness, I would periodically and with great drama and ritual cleanse myself of all remnants of my homosexuality, which at the time meant swearing off homosexual fantasies and burning all my porn. I'd watch my shameful old life go up in smoke, leaving only righteousness and normality before me, and I'd stay high on the rush for days. But kick nature out the door and it flies in the window, and in less than 2 weeks I'd be back at the mall wedging a copy of Playgirl into the pages of Life magazine. Maybe it would be different for Allison. Maybe she'd find some way to make her sacrificial euphoria last. I couldn't begrudge her trying. As Thomas Jefferson said, it's a fucking free country. As Allison concluded, her eyes welled up with tears and her hetero mentor rushed to embrace her. A move soon repeated by each of our mentors as the True Hope retreat came to a close. Before my departure, Ted took me aside for a private goodbye, giving me his phone number and telling me if I ever needed to talk to him about anything, ever, just give him a call, and inviting me to come stay with him and his wife sometime. "We'd love to have you, buddy. And who knows, maybe someday you can visit with a wife of your own." I loved the way conversionists spoke of wives as something automatically bestowed upon successful ex-gays. like 40 acres and a mule. We hugged again, then Ted turned and walked back toward the campus, while I bid farewell to his butt. My final night in Texas, I spent in a very large and noisy Mexican restaurant with my parents. On the drive back from True Hope, I'd made a decision, and when my father asked how my visit with my friend had gone, I told him the truth. Where I'd gone, why I'd gone there, what I'd hoped to achieve, along with why I hadn't told him before and why I was telling him now. After hearing my diatribe on conversion therapy, the only thing my father had to ask was, "Well, does it work?" I'd never had the question put so plainly before. Does conversion therapy work? And I thought, yeah, it works if you make it work. There's no cure, just sacrifice day after day after day for the rest of your life. And if you somehow considered the sacrifice to be God's calling, then maybe you had a chance. If you considered it spitting in God's face, then you were probably doomed. But to my father, I just said, "Not for me." And he said, "Good." Our tender moment was interrupted by my mother, who had a fabulous story she neglected to tell me. That weekend, she and my father had gone out to lunch with a bunch of bikers. Upon his retirement, my father had purchased a Harley Davidson, and now he and my mom were hanging with this middle-aged hog-riding crowd. And on this particular Sunday, my mother had returned from the ladies' room to find my father chastising a group of burly biker men who had apparently made a joke my father did not appreciate. And as the father of a gay son, he saw fit to inform these men that people don't do that with gerbils. I don't get emotional in public, at least not in any recognizable way. Mostly I just look severely constipated. But the double whammy of my father defending me to his biker buddies while simultaneously debunking the myth of the gerbil was enough to give me skin failure. To avoid a scene, I excused myself for the bathroom. "I'll go with you," my dad said, and very soon the two of us were standing together facing a wall of urinals. I understand how satisfying it would be to have this story end with my father and I together, urinating happily side by side. But this isn't a fairy tale. I took the stall. Thank you. Thank you.
So I guess my first question is, how did straight come to be?
Well, I work at an alternative news weekly in Seattle called The Stranger, and I got that job. This is stupid. Dan Savage's column started in The Stranger. He has the column Savage Love, and he saw my first solo show, got me started writing for The Stranger, and then he assigned me an article to investigate the conversion movement in 1998 after that big boom with the full-page ads and stuff. So it started out as a feature for The Stranger, and then Dan had turned one of my other essays he directed a stage version of one of my essays with me, just doing a stage version before, so he said, definitely take that. That story was called Going Straight in the Lone Star State, and then I turned it into Straight. So it was Dan forced me. Dan Savage told me to.
I understand. In the show, you mentioned that you hate acting. But why not just stick to the article then, if you hate it so much?
Well, that's kind of I say that I hate acting, but I've studied acting, so there's a side of acting I hate. Acting is, you have so little control over your life as an actor in America, unless you're a superstar. It's like winning the lottery. You're either going to be an actor, and you're Julia Roberts or George Clooney, and you're rich and rich and rich, and everything's fine, or you're starving to death in a waiter. And just those people, the large majority, you have to sustain yourself, and because acting requires this incredible amount of centeredness, but it attracts the least centered people in the world. It attracts freaks, and so basically you get a lot of people turning it into kind of a cult because they need to have some control over their lives, and just the whole thing about we actors live 1,000 lives and all that makes me want to choke on my own vomit. But David Mamet wrote a few books, just very, very pragmatic about acting, that kind of reset my interest in it after going to a conservatory, which was very, the life of the actor, which was so boring. After studying acting, I moved to Seattle and wanted to write, so I wanted more control over my life than like auditioning and acting. So I kind of have, it's kind of this shticky pose I have of hating acting. But as far as going on the stage, again, Dan talked me into it, but what made sense, I don't do anything that I don't want to do, but what made sense for me was, and this was a big part of my first show, is kind of giving voice to the Wally Cleaver fags. And I just grew up not knowing that there were any boring, regular, normal-looking guys who like to suck dick. So I just thought, there needs to be more gay dorks out there. So that kind of led me to trot myself out in public. And also I did have the actor training, and I could start kind of deconstructing that because I had studied that. So I knew how to construct it, and I could start messing with it in a way that now I don't hate acting anymore because I'm doing it for the right reasons and not the creepy high school people are clapping at me reasons.
Why do you think that Christian fundamentalists are so preoccupied with homosexuals? I mean, it can't be this whole, pent up, hidden sexual frustration.
Right. I think I can talk most clearly about the late 1990s boom attack on the homosexuals by the religious right. And I think there are some perennial hot buttons that the religious right will push to get people excited and get money flowing and to get people kind of galvanized. And it's abortion, women's rights, and gay rights. And abortion had been flogged, and then those abortion doctors started getting killed, and that was kind of hard to contextualize in a positive light. And I think it was just time for gays to be the hot button du jour. And as far as the thread, it's the idea of happy, productive, shame-free homosexuals is inherently threatening to someone who accepts the Bible as literal truth, because we're the devil, and maybe we should be killed. And for people like that, we're the fact that they're not killing us is great enough, but the idea that we want to be accepted, that we want marriage rights and basic civil rights, that's where their worldview, I think, gets really shaken, because it really shows. I mean, it's a tough thing when you have two, like, it just shows that there are other belief systems, and when you need to know that your belief system is right, any sort of manifestation that challenges that is just going to fuck up your life.
Yeah.
So the idea of being able to diagnose homosexuality and say, we know that you have this, and it's I refer to this in the show, but kind of smiley-faced gay bashing. It's this, we love you and we want to help you. So it's framed with this kind of goodwill. It's not it's a lynching, but in a way, but they're kind of like throwing you a party too.
Uh-huh. Well, I mean, you seem to try to really understand, I mean, for lack of a better word, the enemy that you're going up against. And that's kind of gotten you, I had this review, it's kind of got you into trouble. This review from Byron Beck from the Willamette Week in Portland. And he basically takes you to task for trying to humanize the people that you're supposed to just mock.
It's a drag, because the worst responses I've had to the show have been from people who are smack dab in the middle of the gay community as it identifies itself in cities. People who pride is good. There can be no question. Pride is good. Gay people are good. We are brothers and sisters. And that's I hate to say it's a phase, because that's what people say to homosexuals and we go crazy. But, okay. For straight people, there are fraternities. You go to high school and then you go to college, and for 4 years you join a frat and you're just drunk and you bang everyone you want. You're drunk all the time and you throw up, and then you grow up and you go and join the rest of the world. And for gay people, I think there's like, when you come out, you need to spend 4 years doing a gay fraternity kind of thing, where you get angry finally and you slut around and you drink and you're very gay. You see the world through the gay glasses that you have been denied your whole life. And then you kind of move on and you try to connect with the larger world. And this review that you mentioned is someone who's very much, his identity is very much in being a member of the gay community. And
the flags and the rainbow.
Well, that, and also you need, for that to exist, they have to, I mean, I hate to throw around catchphrases, but it's the victim mentality. You have to maintain yourself as victim status, which is not hard to do if you're gay in America. Particularly if you're devoted to it, you can feel oppressed by anything. But like I said, there's a point where the religious right is calling us names and we're calling them names and no one's listening. And I just think gay people are more, on a whole, more sensitive and smarter, and why shouldn't we be the grown-ups for once, you know?
All right, who do you get the better response from your shows, gay men or lesbians? Or do they all hate it?
No, lesbians. Lesbians are really like vocal. So on the whole, I think lesbians like it more. I've just had more lesbians like yell at me in public and say, "Hey, I liked your show," which I love. All lesbians should yell at me. By all accounts, lesbians should be the greatest, most evolved people in the world, because, okay, it's the Jerry Maguire complex. You know, did you see Jerry Maguire?
Yes.
Okay, which is basically about a 35-year-old man who has his first moment of introspection, and his life falls apart, and he goes on a road trip and listens to Tom Petty and sees the light. And for anyone who's ever been overweight or gay or female, that moment came when you were like 11, and it was really hard to rustle up much sympathy for this rich white guy having his first moment of self-doubt.
Yeah.
So I just think if you're a woman or gay or fat or anything outside, you know, the accepted, revered norm, I hate to say it builds character, but it builds character. And you kind of have to defend yourself in some basic ways, and you get better opinions about things because you actually think about stuff. You're kind of outside the world isn't necessarily built for you. You have to forge your own way, and either you become an alcoholic suicide, or you become a really interesting, fat, gay person who might be a woman. So, back to lesbians. They have the female and the gay thing in their favor to make them more interesting. So.
Men and women in their mid-30s, they suddenly decide that they're homosexual. Do you think that is just something that's been bottled inside of them that they've been ignoring, or do you think that it's just more of a, hey, it's not working out being straight, I might as well be gay?
It would be great if there was one answer for that, because, well, I was one of the people who knew when I was 6. I kind of, you know, it was just, when I watched Bewitched, I kind of liked Darren.
Yeah, but I've had, like, you know.
Yeah, but
When I was a
more
kid.
than that, who are you nervous around?
And
Who are you aware of what you're wearing around?
Women,
Who are you
definitely.
aware about your hair and if you have shit in your teeth? And that's where the threshold gets drawn, who you feel vulnerable to. And for that, it was always boys. So for me, whenever I heard the stories about like the college quarterbacks who were like, wait a minute, I want to smoke me some cock. I couldn't believe it. But I do think that there's so much encouraging you. The incentive to be heterosexual is so great that I think if you have the slightest doubt, you're going to keep weighing on the side of, oh, I'm straight. And then there'll be a point where maybe you just wake up and you realize, oh, I'm not, this is my life. I'm 33.
Exactly.
I'm mired in the middle of my life and I need to do what I want to do.
And I really want to smoke some cock.
Exactly.
Well, what about bisexuals then? I mean, are they frauds?
No. I don't think so, because I know some real bisexuals, real live, flourishing, fall in love with one person, serial monogamy, fall in love with another gender later. And for that, I mean, women seem to have more fluidity, which is so cool. Because
I always thought it's been easier for a woman to be bisexual than a man.
yeah, at least, and certainly in college.
Yeah,
I mean, it's kind of hot for a woman to have had a lesbian phase, and it's incredibly damning for a guy to have had a cock-smoking phase, particularly if he's running for president.
Very true.
So, well, in a female president, I think we would insist that they had at least some sort of lesbianic phase. So, bisexuals, I don't know, there are people who say everyone's bisexual, we're all just on this sphere. That totally hasn't laid out in my own life. So, I don't know about that, but I do know real bisexuals, and more power to them. But don't have mullets.
Well, this kind of goes into it. Have you ever slept with a woman?
Does that answer your question?
I would say yes if you answered that way. Definitely.
No, I'm a virgin. And I'm going to sell my virginity on eBay.
Have you ever had any sort of sexual contact with women?
Yes, I have. I love telling this story to straight guys like yourself.
Yes, I know.
2 women in high school wanted some practice with their oral skills, and I was a safe test dummy. So 2 women took turns blowing me in the back of my dad's car. Hi, Dad. Sorry.
Yeah, that's really annoying.
It is
for
annoying.
me.
And what's even more annoying is it took me about 45 minutes to realize that I was going to have to envision a boy if we were ever going to get out of there.
So it was straight because it's a big research piece, and you actually went undercover. And how much creative license did you use when you were doing the play?
Every single thing in the play is true and happened exactly like it did in the show.
Wow.
No. It was general stuff of just where I'd meet people and they'd have a quote, but then I'd be reading. I read a lot of books about the conversion movement and their views, and so often the books would phrase something that I'd heard someone say so much better that I would kind of mesh the character and the ultimate expression of their viewpoint in the book and turn it into one, but it's so there's the basic compression, because it has people, you're asking people to come out and look at it, and it has to have a just basic story arc.
Kind of a flow to it.
Yeah, so.
Oh, very good. I don't know if I buy it, but in the show you have a lot of characters you meet during these groups while you're undercover. And have you met any of them outside of, you run into any of them? Have they responded to the show at all, or actually seen it?
So the guy in the show who heads the Metanoia group is called Grant in the show.
And he was straight, right?
Right, yeah. He's a straight seminary student.
With the nose ring and the blonde hair?
Right. But after a show I did in Seattle, I came out in the lobby and this guy said, "Hi, remember me?" And he looked kind of familiar, and I was afraid that it was a drunken trick from years gone by, because he looked familiar, but I couldn't place him. And then he said, "I'm Grant," which isn't his name, but is his fake name, and we hadn't seen each other since the meeting. So, but he really liked the show. I mean, he was happy for, I think he was just happy for the fact that I did, it wasn't as easy as just picking on midgets, making fun of the conversionists. It was about what is there to really grapple with in their arguments.
Exactly. Which kind of goes back to that whole bullshit review that we talked about earlier.
Right. Yeah. So it's so funny that the ostensible victims of my piece had a much better response than the gay people. But not all gay papers have been that. The two bitchiest reviews I've gotten were from kind of diehard gay liners.
Well, you've had like pretty great reviews for it. I mean, this was the first review I'd seen that was negative to you.
In a way, I've kind of been waiting for that review because I can't play innocent about pushing that person's buttons. I kind of do it pretty specifically in the show. It's meant to annoy the Byron Becks of this world, but.
All right, so in the play, your father is a big character, and he's suddenly had this awakening where he's, the gayest father in America. Is he still like that? Or you describe your relationship as like an office buddy relationship.
Right.
Do you still have that?
There'll always be a degree of that because we're German, and we just kind of, we don't really talk much about abstract things. We make plans. And we talk about things we've done before. But the part of that in the show is that he kind of grows in this way, and it freaks me out. Most gay people are like, oh, well, my parents understand me. But in a way, it's more comfortable when your parents don't understand you because you're not vulnerable to them. So it was this point where my dad was trying to make these strides to connect, and I was like, I'm much more used to having the father that we never discuss what happens below the belt. And then he's like, how's your boy? And asking about anniversaries and stuff. He's great. So we talk about stuff. I'm kind of growing up enough that I can start to talk to him about it. I'm catching up.
So do you talk about like your boyfriend with him?
Yeah,
and
we visit, and he asks about Jake. And
what about sex stuff? Do you ever... Actually, that's kind of a bullshit question because I never talked to my dad about sex. So
thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
It's all right. I show him slides now and then. But...
You're way ahead of me there.
I show your dad slides too.
You might learn a thing or two. Do you have any brothers or sisters? And if so, are they gay?
I have a brother, and he's so gay. He's so fucking gay.
Totally straight, isn't he?
Yeah, he's really straight. He's 5 years older, and there's a thing in the show about, two brothers, one ends up gay, one ends up straight, but they have the same porn, because one guy seems to be gay from this heterosexual porn, and yes, my brother and I looked at the same porn. He showed me my first porn.
What's the best part about being gay? Besides, cock smoking, which you obviously have an affinity to.
Double wardrobes, if you find a guy in your same size, and same aesthetic, which I did. I would never go. There's a school of thought that there's a third gender, and gay people are here to do certain things, and I don't buy into all that. It's a nice thought, and it's a romantic thought, and it's appealing. But on the whole, I just think that being gay, it's great. Women are so great. They're so smart, and they're so interesting and funny as shit if you find the right ones. That to be able to connect with them and not have that vulnerability that we're talking about, to really just I think gay guys can get to know women in ways that it's a little more difficult for straight guys because you're more susceptible to their physical charms, But on the other side, I think if there's anything that makes me an optimist about humanity, it's this new breed of straight guy I'm seeing. These guys who, if the wind had blown a different way when their moms were pregnant, might as well have been gay, but they ended up really straight, but really sensitive and well-spoken, and they tuck their shirts in. They're kind of like the new breed of George Plintons.
What's the worst part about being gay? And if you say, there's nothing, it's great, I'm going to slap you.
When the bar is lowered for gay art because we're a minority, that stinks, because we're really good at stuff. Can I answer the best part of being gay question again?
Of course.
Okay, the worst part of being gay is having answered that question. And the best part of being gay is, goes back to that, but there was a moment, like, I kind of diss gay pride in the show and flog that because no one else is doing it and it needs to be said. But I had a moment of, I think it was 1999, where I realized that, like, both my favorite record and my favorite movie were made by people who just happen to be big gays, and that was my gay pride weekend. I was like, oh my god, like, without any steering, like, the best record I heard this year, Magnetic Fields, and the best movie, Chuck and Buck, were like made by out happy gay people, or happy enough to make stuff. So when the bar kind of gets lowered for gay comedy or gay film fests and all of that, it's a drag, because we don't really need to be coddled in that particular way.
What's the most non-safe place, if that makes any sense, that you've performed straight? Or has it always been any safe sort of like, ooh, there's gay people here and they're wonderful?
That's a great question. I went to a really small town in Washington called Bainbridge Island.
Okay.
And I went out there, and they brought me out, and I thought that was going to be the edgiest one, because I was performing at the fairgrounds, like in a big tin shed. But it had lighting. It was great, but it was very much this kind of, here's this year's gay event, and people came. But I pulled into town, and outside the Chamber of Commerce, a tiny town, they had like a sliding letterboard sign, and it said, Friday night, spaghetti feed, Elks Lodge. Saturday night, straight, fairgrounds. And they were it was another thing where I had built up this faux enemy or threat, and then showed up, and everyone was just like, hey, how you doing, faggy McFagger?
But still, like, I mean, Bainbridge is like basically a wealthy part of Seattle. It's not.
Right.
It's not the Midwest.
It's true.
It's not the South.
Yeah, I didn't do my Midwest tour. Didn't really get calls there.
Yeah,
but
they didn't call and ask you to do straight in the Midwest somewhere?
No, it's never been like, under threat of death or anything.
Have you done it in Texas?
No, but this movie is premiering at the Austin Gay Film Fest, so that's the closest it'll be.
So what's next for you? What are you going to do after straight?
Still working at The Stranger and writing a column for them and general stuff for them, but I'm working on a new solo show called Man Size, and that's it. I don't have it.
And Man Size isn't anything like straight, or is it?
No, it's a
great title, by the way.
Oh, thank you. I stole it from PJ Harvey and Soup.
Well, still from good sources there.
Yes. All the stuff I've done up to now has been like investigative journalism and plopped on stage, but the new one is it's still just me, but it's more fictional. It's more like not a novel.
Uh-huh.
There's a kind of point in every minority movement, whether it was the Jewish or the Black civil rights or gay movement, where basically you have to contend with notes from underground. So there was Portnoy's Complaint, and then there was Invisible Man, and I'm here to do the gay notes from underground. That's what Man Size is about.
Very interesting.
Half notes from underground, half gay true romance.
Wow.
And it's a comedy.
You mentioned in your show that you're a big pot smoker.
Do you want to spit take?
Oh my Lord, honey, here we were, grown adults sitting in the dark, and him a scribbling and a scribbling and a scribbling. Oh, the pain! Ruby, she's done it. I seen a hand laying in a pool of blood. Speak, speak, speak! And you know how sometimes you can get that feeling that somebody is watching you? Ooh, ooh. And the big ugly claws and the blood and the huh? The beast has a new number, 90210. We no longer see you as an evil spirit, more like an economic angel. The main thing is the original bloodstain itself is still there. Now, we've touched it up just a little bit. Have I seen the ghost? Yeah, I seen the ghost. She's a big, bad, naked lesbian who rides a Harley and drags tourists around like chicken bones. She wants a big government, she votes Democratic, and she never goes to church. Now that ought to scare him away.
I know what you come for. You come to see me tell you the truth.
You'll never kill me because I've been dead since I was born.
I'm Janine Jones.
I'm so sick of justice I can puke.
The baby killer.
A good murder? Like a good meal.
Beautiful, isn't it?
They had no right to laugh at me.
The army of the night is waiting.
Stabbing her again
Because I have to do the thinking.
and again and again
Oh!
and again.
I'll leave you on the floor dying in your own blood.
There's really no control at this point.
All right, just back off. Oh, the shrub has thorns.
If you had your way, they'd still be selling asbestos. Damn straight, it's got ass right in the name. What were they thinking?
Take one of these every day and you don't have any problem.
Why doesn't somebody just kill me and put me out of my misery?
There's a limit to how stupid I am.
That's not true. Not every fuck dog has a giant magical penis come along to solve all their problems for them.
Hello, operator? Yes, I'd like to make a person-to-person call, please. This is Orson Welles. There I was, a 24-year-old wunderkind being handed the key to the city. Hilton told me I was an extraordinary young man. I said, I know. Who knows? Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men? The shadow knows. With one film, I had established myself as the most exciting director now working. If I had half the power these people attribute to me, I could rule the fucking world! Only one critic dared to speak against it. It was the last one he ever gave. New Jersey was being destroyed! They had to save themselves! We cannot allow a studio pissing contest to compromise this picture. Who should I blame? You're destroying my greatest work and all over a single screening and the fear of losing your job. Yes, it's tragic, but it's also very beautiful.